Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Critical Podcast. I'm your host, Jimmy Good, and joining me this week is an incredibly special pair of guests. Once again, the Provost from Provost Park Pass. Provost, how are you guys doing?
Hi, we're doing so good. It's so excited to be here. I'm Chris.
I'm Amanda, and we are happy to be back on your show.
Jimmy, we love to be on your show anytime.
Oh my gosh. I guess you guys are on every week. I was going to start the show off with going, because I know that's Chris, how you start your guys' podcast, which you guys just started making podcasts pretty recently. And it's funny because I was watching Nightmare Before Christmas and Oogie Boogie says, well. And I was like, is that where you got the well? Is that just something you decided to say? Like,
no, it just something that kind of came out one time, just started doing it. I don't know where that came from. Amanda does the well a lot with Oogie Boogie.
That's what I thought of. So, Jimmy, I'm right on the same page as you. When he started doing it, I looked over at him like, Oogie Boogie?
Yeah.
But I think it's more just Chris's brain.
Yeah, just my brain. It's just my brain.
Yeah,
so.
I like it because it feels like you almost walked into a podcast that was happening, and you're just like, well, I guess I'll be doing another podcast.
Here we are, guys.
No, I love it. It's fantastic. And you guys are focused, obviously, around a bunch of Disney stuff, and you've done, is it 7 shows so far, or something like that?
Actually, 9, I think.
9? Oh, is it 9? Oh my gosh. Okay, I just caught up. So I'm like listening to all of them. And as I said before the show, I just want more of them. So I'm always excited when a Tuesday comes around because I'm like, oh, it's another Provost podcast. So
that makes us so happy to hear. You know, it's funny because we our friend who does lots of podcasts, he's like, I think you should probably do, 23 to 27 minutes. I'm like, okay. We've had a lot of people tell us it should be longer, but I was like, I don't know if you could listen to us any longer. I mean, you can listen to Amanda. I get that. But my voice, people are like, we're tuning out now.
Oh, whatever. You've got the good voice name. But we love it. We've wanted to do a podcast for a long time, and we love to talk. We love to talk about Disney and Disney parks. And so it was just kind of a perfect fit to do a podcast too.
And it was, what's interesting about this, Jimmy, is the podcast is really Amanda's brainchild. She comes up with every topic. She's the one that really was pushing to do it. And I was like, I don't know. And it just is taken off, and people really seem to like it.
Well, a fun thing about Chris that a lot of people don't know is his dream job would be to be a radio.
A
radio host.
Yeah.
Or like a radio DJ. And so this is kind of
fulfilling that fantasy.
Fulfilling that for him too, to be able to kind of have this talk show in a sense. Yeah.
Totally. Well, I was going to say, I kind of felt that because when you're listening to the show, I feel like you've got your hand on the buttons for all the sound effects.
Yes.
Like you want to be like the morning drive time guy who's just like waiting to hit the button. You're like, which is great. No, I think it's really fun. And you guys obviously have such a great chemistry together. And I think it's distilled into this show because on your other videos, like Secrets Revealed on your YouTube channel and stuff, you don't really have a lot of chances to do back and forth. Because it's more of like, just straight up information. You can't really have those moments. So I think it's really cool. And I think it's something that once people hear it, like I said, they're going to want more of it. So that's a good thing for you guys, right? Like they're going to want like more of them. They're going to want them to be longer. They just want like a Provost Park Pass like radio, which if any of the Provost Park Pass fans are listening, they're going to be like, that's a great idea. And I'll be like, no, they can't be on all the time.
That's awesome.
It sounds really good. And I've listened to plenty of Disney podcasts in the past, but I don't know. I really love you guys. So it's just like, it's easy for me to like tune in and I'm like, oh my gosh. And again, they go by so fast. I was just listening to the one that you did, the top 3 free things you can do down at Walt Disney World. And I was like, man, that was quick. And I was like, okay, I could listen to more of this. So,
that's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
We had one of my favorite things that's happened is Amanda was jogging the other day and some guy was listening to the podcast and saw her. He's like, oh my gosh, it's Amanda. He's like, I'm listening to you right now. And I see her jogging on the street. So he's like,
we jogged past each other and he was listening to our show as he was jogging. And then he passed me.
And he's like, oh my gosh, Amanda. I'm looking at you right now.
That's amazing. I bet he was like kind of starstruck. He's like, oh my gosh. He's just like, like she's right here. And he's like, I've got some podcast ideas for you. And you're like, all right, no, you can write them in. No, I'm sure.
It really was so funny. Like, what are the odds that he's listening to me and passes me on the street? And he had no idea that I was in the area jogging. It just happened to kind of work out that way. So
It's beautiful.
if you are, I guess if you're working out, if you're cleaning the house, if you're just hanging out, it's a podcast you can listen to.
Yeah, apparently it's a jogging podcast.
Yes, oh for sure. And I found myself doing that where it's just kind of like you're doing, household chores and things, and you just have it on in the background. But it's just nice. It's comforting because it sounds like two of your friends have like all this density information that they're kind of throwing at you, and you're just kind of doing things, and you're like, oh, this is nice multitasking. Awesome. So yeah, I'm looking forward to more. I'm guessing you guys probably have like a long list of ideas before you even started. Like that's kind of a typical podcast thing.
Yes.
Yeah. It's interesting because Amanda, she, like I said, she's come up with all these topics. She has a huge long list. And then she comes up, she's like, hey, this is what we're talking about today. And we just go and start doing it. And then we do another one. And it's a lot of fun. And I'm surprised with some of the topics. Like, this is a fun topic. I love talking about this stuff.
Well, what can I say? You guys are fun, and Amanda's intelligent, so I'm not really surprised that there's like a good list. It's not like, all right, top 5 rocks in Disneyland. I like this one, that one over there. You're like, it's a reddish one. What's the backstory? We don't know.
That's a great idea for an April Fool's video. Maybe when the parks reopen, I'm going to send Chris out there to do the top 5 rocks of Disneyland.
Somebody actually, because in one of our videos on YouTube, I talked about this pathway in Adventureland. It's the least walked on pathway in all of Disneyland. And they just mentioned that in just a little hey, just so you know, this is where you go if you want to be away from people. And one of my friends down there, he ended up making a joke called Provost Park Pass something. It was like the top 5 walkways of Disneyland. And he was just doing the walkways. It's one of my favorite videos. It's so funny.
It's so funny. We should try to pull that up and put it out there because it was so funny. It was just a parody. Yeah. And the top 5 walkways.
We're now going to do top 5 rocks.
Now we're going to do top 5 rocks. Thanks to you. We'll do it.
I'm happy to take 10% of the views. No, I'm just
kidding. Absolutely. Well, what's funny though is that's what a lot of our most popular videos are suggestions from fans. Like we did the top 5 drinking fountains. We did the top 5 bathrooms at Disneyland, the top 10 benches.
I love benches.
People you don't even care about that. But then because we worked with Disney and we had the custodial staff teach us all about the drinking fountains. I learned so much about that video. I was like, holy cow. And learned all these cool things. So, and those videos do really well. People love that stuff.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Well, I think it's because you guys are clearly such big Disney fans, and people who are attracted to you, such as myself, are also huge Disney fans. It's not like you can't watch it if you've never been to Disneyland or Disney World before, but you get a greater appreciation for those things because you've seen them, tens, if not hundreds of times for some people, especially Disneyland. And they're like, yeah, I guess these are the best drinking fountains or benches or queue lines or whatever it is. So I appreciate it.
For example, the drinking fountain one, there's that one it's in New Orleans Square. There's a plaque there. That plaque is was brought over from New Orleans. Walt brought that plaque himself. I mean, you would never know that. You're just getting drinking water and look at this plaque. That's nice. You don't realize Walt carried that plaque back from New Orleans specifically for a drinking fountain.
It's nuts, the history, especially in Disneyland too. And I was talking to somebody today or the other day about this, and I was like, when you go into Disneyland, it feels like you're walking into history. And you can feel it. And I don't really know what it is. And they could have, with the money they've gotten over the years, they could have changed all that up. They could have ripped up Main Street and changed it all up, but they haven't. They've kept it that way. And when you're walking in there, you have the sense that part of it or portions are locked in time. And that's so cool. He's walking around, you're like, oh my gosh, this is nice, because everything in our world is kind of constantly changing. And it's nice to have a few things that remind us of where we came from. So
I love that. No, I love that. I think you nailed it. Yeah, you're kind of walking into history. I love that.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Thank you. Well, and you guys do a great job of bringing that history home for a lot of people. And clearly a lot of people are resonating with it, especially people in Canada, it sounds like. So that's a good thing for you.
I know. Our podcast was #1 in Canada. We were surprised. So we love Canadians. Yay.
Oh my
if you're
gosh.
Canadian listening to this, we love you.
Yes, Canadians are the best. I mean, they're just a little north of me from Minnesota here. So I totally get it. When I go to the Canadian Pavilion in Epcot, it feels like my brothers and sisters. We're all speaking the same language, you know what I mean? So, we're just eating pretzel bread and eating steaks. It's fine. That's just what we do. But yeah, so, okay. I could talk to you guys about your channel all day long, but we're here to talk about something specific. We'll get back to that, but I want to talk to you guys. I wanted to bring you on because we maybe mentioned this last time, but I want to talk today about a little film called Indiana Jones Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Oh my God.
And I know this is a film that you guys love, and if you guys would remind me and our viewers of your love affair with this film, and also a chance to see it in theaters or something again, maybe renting out a theater or something.
Yes.
Remind me, please.
So yeah, absolutely. So it was for our anniversary. And Amanda, the theaters here, they're trying to, remain relevant or whatever they have. But Amanda, she rented out the movie theater and for our anniversary, and they gave her a huge catalog of movies to see. And she chose Raiders of the Lost Ark, and it was amazing. We were the only two people in the theater, and it's so funny because when we showed up, they thought for some reason they got Amanda put 2. And they thought they put 20. So when we got there, they had 20 huge bags of not bags of popcorn.
20 buckets of popcorn.
20
sodas.
Yeah. And they had it all taped off where people could sit. So social distancing. Like, no, it's not 20, it's 2. They're like, oh.
So they ended up loading up big sacks full of popcorn and sodas, and we took them home.
But that was Amanda's very first time ever seeing Raiders on the big screen.
Oh, really?
And she said that it made all the difference.
Yes. Well, it's definitely one of those films that, buckets of popcorn aside, which I'm sure, Amanda, you were stoked about. You're like, oh my gosh, I get all this. You're like, no, there's 200 people coming. More popcorn, please.
More popcorn. I wanted to go swimming in it. I'll go swimming in the popcorn.
Exactly. But it's a film that came out in the early 1980s, if I'm not mistaken, right? So around there, 83 or so, or something like that.
I think it came out in 82, if I remember. I'm not exactly sure, 82. Okay. And the thing about this movie, for Raiders of the Lost Ark, and I just want to talk, we can talk about this movie a lot. It's in my mind, it's one of the perfect movies. There's a small handful of movies out there where I watch. I'm like, it's perfectly cast. The actors are amazing in it. The cinematography in this film is insanely good.
Yep.
It is so good. The shots that they chose and everything they tried to do, it just makes the movie so amazing. The dialogue is great. The plot is great. It's just so much fun to watch. And Harrison Ford, you can't not look at him on the screen. He's just so good.
Yeah, exactly. And it's so funny, Chris, I feel like you're in my head because I wrote some notes down for this, and the first thing I wrote was great shots. And there's one in particular that I would just like to draw everybody's attention to if we want to get specific here for a second. I'm talking about the silhouettes sunset in Cairo or in Egypt, right outside, and they're digging, and Indy puts the hat on, and they're all, and it's just, it's amazing. One of
my very favorite scenes, and they're singing, they're I was like, da 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 da. Yes. And he puts the hat on, and you hear the wind kind of blowing. It is a gorgeous shot. Another one that I don't think gets a lot of recognition, but I think is amazing, is when they're in the bar and Miriam's like, come back tomorrow, Indiana. And he the door stops and a little triangle of light, the diamond of light ends up perfectly on his eye. And it's so good. It's so amazing. It just makes it so much fun that you're like, oh my gosh, that's such a great shot. Another fun thing about that is what a lot of people don't know, when the boulder rolls down, Indiana Jones, Harrison Ford, he did his own stunt, and they recorded him doing that 5 different times. Whoa. And there's one time, if you watch it, he stumbles and falls.
Oh, really?
And he lands on his knee and gets up, starts running, and it was not on purpose. He literally fell. And when they watch it, it's so realistic that they kept that's the shot they used. And it is. When he's running, you see, when you watch it again, you'll see there's a part where he stumbles and his knee hits and he gets up and keeps running. That's why it makes it so intense, I think, because you're like, oh my gosh, he fell down.
Oh, for sure. Well, that kind of reminds me of a shot they used recently for the most recent Mission Impossible Fallout, where Tom Cruise is the one where he jumps off a building and he actually broke his ankle, and then he got up and he stumbled past, and they were like, that's the shot we're going to use because it looks so good. But he was like, right after that, he was like, I need to go to the hospital. He's like, I broke something. I got to go.
Crazy stunts. Tom Cruise is amazing. He is so good with his stunts and his acting that it's out of control.
Yeah. Amanda, are there any shots that come to mind for you that, because I don't want to leave you out of this. Is there anything that comes to mind right away, or just moments in the film where you're just like, oh my gosh, this is just especially on the big screen when you're like, oh, there it is, I can touch it.
Yes. So like Chris mentioned earlier, I agree with him. I feel like this is one of the movies that is perfect, or if not perfect, it's near perfect. And for me, I feel like that's huge to say. Chris is a big movie guy. He was really into movies and theater and acting. And I sometimes am more there for the popcorn, like we joke about, but I am being serious. But with Indiana Jones and Raiders, it's a near perfect film for me. I can watch it over and over and over. So for me, one of the shots, and you guys can laugh, you can totally laugh, but it's something that I was able to see up close in the movie theater, and it's when the fly goes into Belloc's
mouth at the very end.
he's standing there. There's, a pretty clear shot of him, and it's something you miss. A lot of times you'll miss it if you're watching it on the TV, but seeing it on the big screen, you can see a fly actually flies onto his face and it goes into his mouth. And I think that's another thing that I love that it's there. I love that they kept it. I think it's really gross, but I also think it's realistic. I mean, they're out in this, really rugged terrain, and there's going to be flies, there's going to be bugs. And I just thought it made it like super raw and gritty and realistic to see that.
And you also told me that scene that you really loved that you didn't really appreciate until you saw on the big screen was when Indy and Marion are running away from the airplane.
Yes.
And they're in step. Their legs are perfectly in step with each other. It's like boom, 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 boom. And as they're running away, Amanda's like, oh my gosh, that looks so good on the big screen.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. I really think everything is beautiful though. Like when you kind of just scan through the show from beginning to end, I feel like everything is so well done. It's so beautiful. Like you were talking about the sunset scene. I mean, everything is just so visually appealing. That makes it fun to watch too, because it's not just a great story. It's not just great acting, but it's really just like beautiful to watch.
So here's a little bit of trivia about this movie, and we're gonna tie it into Disney because we love Disney, right? Of
course, yes.
So in the movie, there's a monkey, and the monkey at one point raises its paw, and it's like, "Hell Hitler." It's a little monkey thing. And Steven Spielberg loved that gag. He thought that was really, really funny. He liked that gag. Well, the guy who did the voice at the time, his name was Frank Welker. He did the little monkey voice. He just was on set working. He did that little monkey voice. He's like, well, he's also the voice of Abu in Aladdin, the monkey in Aladdin. So he played the monkey twice. I don't know. They must say, when they cast him for Aladdin, like, do you have any monkey experience? Like, well, yeah, actually, I do. In Raiders Last Ark.
That's amazing. Right as you're saying that, I was like, oh, of course, he's going to be Abu. Like, that's what it's going to be right here. It's like, of course, at least thankfully, Abu never tried to poison Aladdin with a bad date or anything like that, which is really good. Or, I mean, I guess he didn't know, like, the monkey got kind of caught off guard, even though it was like an evil monkey. Which I think is funny in the movie, too. Like, one of the first times you might watch it, you're like, oh, Indy doesn't really like this thing too much. He kind of hangs around with him, but then when everybody thinks Marion's dead, he kind of takes it with him as kind of like, oh, Marion really liked this thing. It's kind of like our thing. I'm going to keep it around. That's the only reason it's still here.
Exactly.
It was like a spy that ended up kind of helping him out in a way. Which is really good. So, and I actually read through the entire screenplay upon like watching it this time. I'm trying to learn a bit about the behind the scenes stuff. And it was really interesting to see that scene with the bad dates, that whole sequence was actually a lot longer in the screenplay. And I think that a lot of stuff was trimmed down or trimmed out of the screenplay for the film. I think it helps it, honestly. It makes it move.
Oh, it does. And speaking of trimmed out stuff, is at the very beginning when Brody visits Indiana Jones in his house to say, hey, congratulations, you're going. He's dressed kind of like, Indiana Jones is dressed a little, you're like, why is he dressed like that? The reason was because in the original script, there was a woman in the bedroom, and they had a whole scene where they wanted to kind of make him, they were going to try to make him like James Bond, more of a womanizer.
Which he is a womanizer. They don't have to make him a womanizer.
Right, but they felt like they're like, oh, we're just going to cut that out because it didn't really add anything. And I think by cutting it out, like what Amanda says, it made him more of a womanizer in your mind.
Because it's not so overt. It just is. It just is. They don't have to show it. They don't have to overdo it. He just is.
He's a man's man. He's just, everybody loves him. And like that scene when he's in the classroom, that girl has "love you" written on her eyelids is just so perfect.
Yeah.
It's so weird. And it's like, so like, there's so many kind of like odd eccentricities, if that's redundant in this film, like stuff like that, where you watch it, you're like, that wouldn't fly. Like today, you wouldn't see something like that, where it's like, why? And then you start to think of the logistics. You're like, so this young woman is a student and she wrote this, or did someone else write it on? And it's like, that wouldn't fly today. But in that movie, it's great because Indy's like giving this lecture and he's like, and he starts staring at her. He's like, what? It's like, what's going on? And then when he talked about kind of going to his house, I think it's good that they cut it because they start talking about Marion a lot too, and it would be kind of weird to have him be like another. He's like, I wonder how she's doing. And it's like, it's like
I never thought of that. You're exactly right. I love that thought. But I love like when going back to like when that's what makes this movie so good is the stumbles. I mean, the acting. For example, when he stumbles, when he reads that "I love you," and it ruins his concentration for a second. Natural. It's also like when the government workers are coming in and they're in the classroom, the gym. And he's like got the Bible there, and he's like, like the fire and brimstone. And he asks them, he's like, "Did you guys ever go to Sunday school?" And they're like, they're like, it's so realistic.
Yeah.
Like, well, I mean, when I was little, and they get all defensive. that's what makes it so good, because it's just like, you're like, oh, that's exactly what a conversation would be like with me and my friends if we're having that type of conversation.
Well, I think that's good to kind of ground it a little bit, because so many times action movies, it's just about the action.
Yeah.
This really had moments where it brought it back to reality. Like you said, it kind of grounds the film a little bit, because there are some things that are so over the top, but then you kind of get back to reality. Like, okay, I feel like this is a real story unfolding, not just an action movie with explosions and guns and stuff. Like they ground it so it makes it feel a little bit more real.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Oh,
yeah, and it is, and like, yeah. So for more trivia, I mean, this movie is so good. At the end of the movie, it originally had an R rating because of the head exploding and at the very end when the head melts, and that was a very, very expensive process. They did the plaster casts of heads and all this stuff, and they're like, well, I got an R rating, and they're like, well, how do they didn't know how to, they can't edit that scene down. So what they did is they put fire over it. They overlaid fire over it, so the fire is going, and then the head, so it kind of blurs the gore a little bit. And that's how they got the PG ratings. Back then, they didn't have PG-13, so they just put fire over it. So that's why the fire's there to kind of tone down the gore a little bit. Which I thought, what a brilliant way to handle that situation. Right, we can't reshoot this, so we'll just put fire over it.
That's amazingly strange. And then of course you think of like Temple of Doom. I think was like the first PG-13 rated film. Or something like that.
Yeah, it was. The Temple of Doom was what ushered in. It was actually rated PG, but parents freaked out after they saw it. They're like, "This should have been rated R," and people were like, "It's too much." So it was that. So Temple of Doom, and another movie came out called Poltergeist.
Yeah,
and it was a scary movie, and that was also rated PG. And those two movies ushered in PG-13 movies. So.
Yeah, and I feel like Temple of Doom, I feel like is more of a PG-13 movie than Raiders for sure. I feel like Raiders now would be PG-13.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know.
I think it would. I think it would nowadays. But yeah, Temple of Doom is definitely a little bit more.
Well, Steven Spielberg, he just broke up with his girlfriend, and he admitted he was in a darker place when he filmed it. It's a much darker movie.
Film. Yeah, it's probably my least favorite. It's darker, but Raiders is my first.
Yeah. I was going to say, I'm glad, because sometimes if you're talking to other Indiana Jones enthusiasts, if you say, like, you're like, I'm not as big a fan of Temple of Doom. I like aspects of Temple of Doom. I love that they probably made a lot of the Temple of the Forbidden Eye based on some things in Temple of Doom.
Yeah.
However, as a film, comparatively to like Raiders and then like The Last Crusade, which was Spielberg coming back being like, all right, you want a regular Indiana Jones movie?
Yeah.
Here's a regular Indiana Jones movie. It's like, thank you. Yes, more of these, please. Like, so I'm totally with you guys there. But there's something about Raiders, and I think most of the films have this too, but the emphasis on physical effects. There are a few special effects in here insofar as like computer generated things that haven't aged as well per se. But at the same time, most of the other stuff is so real, and that makes it so much more timeless. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Oh, I love that.
So let's, like, for example, what you're talking about, the fight scene in the bar, in Marion's bar.
Yes.
That is, even to today's standards, that fight scene is amazing. I mean, they're shooting each other, they're punching, there's fire going across the bar, and it is so well done that I can't believe how good that is. It's just amazing. I love it. The guy gets hit in the top of the head with a log. Yeah. All of it is so good that it just makes. I mean, like nowadays they would do it more like CGI fighting and type thing. That was all practical, and I think that's why it looks so good.
Yes.
Oh, totally. Yeah, I was saying, Amanda, I feel like you want to weigh in on this too. Do you have any like special moments where you're like, oh, that effect looks so good still?
No, I completely agree with you. I feel like just having a lot of the effects real and raw, again, just going back to that grounding, it really grounds the film. So you feel like you are just watching it unfold. It's not contrived. It's not fake. And they had so many amazing real and raw fight scenes. I mean, my fight scene is definitely the airplane scene.
Oh, man, the airplane.
I think it's incredible.
It's so good.
It's so good. And so I completely agree with you guys.
Well, think about the boulder scene when he's running away from the boulder. Nowadays, they would have done that in a green screen room, and they would have done motion tracking to capture boulder. But that was practical effect. That boulder was really rolling down on tracks and following him, and it makes it look so good.
Yeah, it does. It made it. And like you said before, I think you called it timeless. So it just makes it timeless, because those effects, real fights like that, that's not going to age like some other special effects do as technology advances. So they did it right.
Yeah, and there's another little fun trivia thing about that movie. Amanda's talking about the airplane scene. I can't remember his name now. It's eluding me. But I think he was the art director. And he ended up, they're like, hey, do you want to be in this scene? And they put him in as the pilot of the plane, where he and Marion were in that plane. So they just put him in there, and he shoots a little gun there.
Yes.
And he was like the art director. He's like, yeah, this would be super fun. And afterwards, he hated it because he ended up being in that cockpit, I think, for 8 hours. And it got over like 120 degrees in there. They had it closed, and he kept passing out because it's so hot. And they give him water and stuff like that. So afterwards, he's like, I don't think I'll ever do that again.
I don't blame him. That sounds horrible. Because like, I'm sure at first you're like, yeah, I'm going to be in this cool blockbuster movie. Sounds great. I'm usually behind the scenes. What am I going to do? Yeah. Like, Steven's like, all right, you're going to get in the cockpit over there for 8 hours. I'm like, nah, right? And he's like, go, get in there.
Yeah, get in there. We're going to close. By the way, we're going to close it so you don't get any fresh air in there either. So yeah, that's a fun scene. And I mean, this movie is just jam-packed. One of the greatest Easter eggs in this whole movie is when they're in the Well of Souls and they're approaching the Ark. If you look off to the right-hand side of the screen, it's much easier to see in a large screen. And they have like the hieroglyphs are carved in. R2-D2 and C-3PO are carved right there. And it's just a little throw. And I was like, what? Why did they do that? It's so amazing. I love that they did that.
Yes.
Oh yeah, totally. I love too that like, because that this has like a little bit of the Star Wars DNA in it. You like some of the sound effects, like when the airplane starts up, like Jock's airplane starts up, it sounds like something out of Star Wars. Or when like the lightning comes out of the Ark, it sounds like Star Wars lasers or something, and you're like,
yeah, absolutely. What the heck? Well, in Temple of Doom, when Indiana Jones goes to the dinner, he's actually wearing a pants with a stripe. He's wearing Han Solo's pants. Oh. So with the stripe that goes down the side, and they just let him wear those pants, just a little wink and nod, like, hey, we know this is the same guy.
The fun little nods, the fun connections. I think it's great.
Oh, totally. And like the lounge at the bar itself is called Obi-Wan, so it's just like,
Club Obi-Wan is great.
I love like, Temple. Yeah,
that's great.
Which, by the way, you can tell in that movie, by the way, Temple of Doom, the beginning is very more. They're like, we should make him James Bond, and then
yes.
Yes. Sure? Yes, that's so true.
It is very true. But the Raiders is just a movie that even now, I don't know how many times we've seen it, but if it's on, Amanda and I will sit down and we'll both just cuddle up and watch it and just enjoy it. And it's just a fun movie to watch.
Yeah. Oh, totally. And I think it's funny too, because you look at somebody like Indiana Jones and you kind of realize throughout the film, he's not really a classic hero. He's got this dual kind of personality. He's a professor, by day, but by night he's like this archaeologist, and also he will kind of do whatever it takes to kind of win. And there's even a moment, I keep forgetting this moment, but like Marion's, tied up at the camp and he goes and saves her, but he's like, wait a sec, if I save you right now, they're going to find me. And he's like, you got to stay here. And he like leaves her and you're like, oh man, like I can see why she's really angry with this guy.
That's an decision that he makes there, because he could leave with her, but then he has to lose the Ark.
Exactly.
And so he's making that decision. He's like, you know what, I'm still going to get the Ark, but I'll come back for you. He's a very flawed character, but that's exactly what most people do. Something you've been chasing your whole life.
Yeah, you got it. Yeah,
you're that close. You're like, what do I do?
Figuring it out in your head, and there's so much going on, and he does a great job.
Yeah, and
I love his character.
He's such a one-man army too. He's very adaptable, and he'll kind of go against odds where you're like, how is he going to get through this? And I love that, like, the whole sequence from breaking out of the Well of Souls and then going, to the airplane fight, and then the whole like what truck, and then he's like, I gotta go and I have to fight through this now, and he's like on a horse and he's trying to climb all these trucks, and it's like poor Indy is just having like the worst day, and he's like, I'm just gonna get this thing, and then eventually there's a point where he starts to bluff people. He's like, I'm gonna blow it up with a rocket launcher. He's like, you know what? He's like, I'm done with this. I'm so done with all of you being jerks, and I don't know. It's fun to watch him just kind of crash through things, even though he's like, I got to preserve this. He's like, if I got to fight for my life, I'm going to take people with me.
Well, that's what I think is so interesting. If that movie was made today, or if something similar, in that scene where he's got the bazooka and he's pointing it at the Ark, he's like, I'm going to blow it up. The way that they resolve it, I think Belloc is like, do it. Send it back to God. Send it back, and we'll just make this, whatever. And he calls Indy's bluff because he knows Indy so well, because he's the same. He's like, it's priceless. He knows he won't do it. If it was made today, they wouldn't allow that to happen. They would have like some guys sneak up behind him and wrestle the bazooka away and never give him that chance to make that decision, because Indy fails. He can't do it. He's like, blow it up, and Indy just can't do it. So I think that's so great that they show that, because he's just like a great character.
Oh, totally. And I also love that, Belloc, I think, is maybe one of the best. I think about it, he's kind of a subtle villain in a sense. But in movie history, not a lot of people say, like, oh, the greatest villains of all time. Like, obviously, our boy Vader shows up near the top, right?
Right.
But, like, it's not like, and Belloc. Like, no, not a lot of people do that. Yeah. But I like that in this first film, he's there, and he even says at one point, he's like, Indy, I'm like a dark reflection of you. Like, that's right from the beginning. It's not like the second or third movie. It's right from the beginning. And his character's so compelling. I think he's so interesting because he's not like a super bad guy. He does bad things, but he's not like the most evil.
Well, the thing of Belloc that is such an interesting character because he's I think he can be even smarter than Indiana Jones. He outwits Indiana Jones. He's like one step ahead. And then you see him. He's just very normal. He's with Miriam. You kind of like him. You kind of like him a little bit. You're like, oh my gosh, this guy's relatable. He's doing what he thinks is right, even though it's in direct contrast with Indiana Jones, which makes him a really good character, very compelling. But I don't think a lot of people think of him as a villain though, because seems relatable.
But that's what I like about him. I feel like he is a little bit of a villain, but it's very subtle, and it's not just pure evil, take over the world. He's complex, and so I like it. Yeah. And he's smart too.
Oh, for sure. And I love something that I just picked up on this time, but he says it twice in the film. He says to the other Nazis he's working with, he says, well, your Fuhrer wouldn't like this. He never says it as if he's under the employ of him or under the employ of the Nazis. He's like, this is a means to an end. He even tells Marion, he's like, I'm not associated with these guys beyond this project. He's like, I'm sorry, I'm just kind of here because they're funding this.
Well, he's doing exactly what Indiana Jones is doing. He's using whatever means he can to get the Ark. Yeah. And Belloc this determines I could use it with the Nazis. I could get it faster. Indy chooses to just go after it straight on, head on. But neither one of them are sympathetic to the German cause, which is great. I like that. And so I think it's fun to watch that. It's fun to see how they're doing that. I think Belloc is French, by the way. So his country is in direct juxtaposition to the German army.
They're both just doing what they feel like they need to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and there's a great moment too where he and Marion are doing this kind of drinking contest, and this whole movie, I think, upon kind of watching it, reading the screenplay with it, it was like this movie's all about setups and payoffs. And when we first see Marion, we kind of know she can drink somebody under the table. And when she meets Belloc, she's like, all right, I'm going to do this to him. And he's drinking this thing. He's like, that's my family label. And then later on, when the other bad guys come in, he kind of sobers up immediately because I think he was kind of almost playing too. Like they're both kind of trying to play each other. Yeah. And you're like, oh, Marion's got this. But then, oh, wait, no, she doesn't. And it's like, oh, dang. Like, it's just so like, because it's a callback. You're like, oh, that's great. And it just kind of subverts that expectation in a fun little way. Because you're like, oh, is she going to get out of here? How far is she going to get? He's like, it's 3 weeks in any direction. Good luck with that. Yeah. And then, and then just like Belzig or whatever, the main bad guy or that kind of the guy with all the black, he comes in. He's
so good.
He's like, I'm back. And then he like shows up with like that thing and you're like, is that like a nunchuck or something? And then it's just like a coat hanger. And he just hangs it up.
What's interesting about that? That's my mom's favorite scene. She talked about that because she's like, when he'd pull that out, she's like, is he going to choke you with it, or is he going to hit you, or is it going to cane you? Then it just turns to be in a hanger, which is so funny.
And you just see the relief would just wash up everyone's face, like, oh, it's a coat hanger.
Yeah. Oh, and I like that guy is like such a creep and such a weirdo, and like you have to kind of be paying attention a little bit because you're like, okay, why haven't they found exactly where the Ark is? And it's because they only have one side of that amulet, which he grabbed during the fire in that cool fight sequence back in the Himalayas, or in Tibet. Yeah. It's just like, oh my gosh, because you really got to like look into that, because when you start to notice that, you can really appreciate even more like the setup and build up to these things, because you're like, well, what the? Oh, okay, because on the back it says you have to go, take one back. Yeah, so they're taking
you got to get back to God as a thank you. It's the script, like you said, the script is amazing, and that has perfect setups, and it's setting. And the thing is, there are movies like when you watch movies sometimes. You're like, oh, okay, they're showing this, so we know we're going to use this later on. Like, you're watching like a horror movie and they set the knife on the counter and they make a big show of that. So, later on, they're like, oh, they're going to come back and grab that knife, or the knife's going to be missing. So but in Raiders Lost Ark, it's so subtle. You're just actually watching story unfold. And then you realize the payoff. You're like, oh my gosh, I know what's going to happen.
Yeah, you're able to kind of go back and then like see how the pieces all fit together. But really well done. It's not in your face.
Mhm.
They really take into account that, like, okay, people, they're going to be able to figure this out.
Yeah. And the one thing that we haven't really even mentioned yet that's so iconic about this movie is the music.
Yeah.
Are you in my head, Chris? I don't understand. I was like, all right, we're going to subtly transition into music here. And Chris is just like, he's going to say it for me. So perfect segue. Yes, Chris, the music. It's amazing. Please go on.
Oh, the music is so good. The whole movie, the music is awesome. We all know the scene, right? Everybody knows the song. And this even happens to me now. I still skateboard and I ride my bike every once in a while. And when I'm by myself and I'm kind of going fast, my skateboard, I literally am like, dun, 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 dun. I can't help it. Or I do something exciting. I'm like throwing the music in my mind. I love it. But even the subtle music, like when they're in the mapping room, when they're in the map room and they have the lights coming to, that music, that was like that chorus, like, I'm not going to do that. That sounded terrible. But it's all of the music's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, what's the great thing about this film, because we were talking about action earlier, and that this film doesn't do constant action all the time.
Right.
And it builds to it. And there's a lot of reverence, especially for the Ark. And when we get to see those government men at the beginning, and Indy's kind of explained to him the whole Sunday school thing, you hear that the Ark theme, and it's very subtle, and it's just there, and it's kind of in the background, and it builds throughout the film. Every time it's like you're getting closer and closer to it. And it's just such a great, because there's the Indy theme that's just amazing, but then there's that Ark theme that you're just like, it's mysterious and kind of like ethereal, and you're like, oh my gosh. And when you finally kind of see it open and it starts playing that again, you're like, and it's just so good. John Williams is a master, and I really don't think, like, Raiders, people talk about it, but they're not always mentioning the music, and the music is so good. Or like the music they play when they're during the truck sequence, or when they're, he's fighting on the airplane, and there's that kind of, it's like this military kind of style. Yeah. It's so good, and it always reminds me of just that great Stunt Spectacular down at Hollywood Studios, and I'm just like, Stunt Spectacular. The music is incredible. It's one of the best things about this film, for sure, no question.
Yeah, it is. And this is I don't know how to explain this. I don't want to be like we're name dropping, but one of our good friends is John Rhys Davies. Amanda and I know him quite well, and we have a fun. One of our favorite photos. We went to dinner with him, and our son Miles was 3 at the time, I think.
Yeah, it was just last year.
So yeah, John and Miles are sitting by each other, and they're both coloring on the menu, the children's menu, and they're just coloring and talking. And it's so funny to watch them. But talking to him, I asked him, like, do people always ask you questions about Raiders? And he's like, well, he goes, it depends on the age of the person. Younger people, it's all Lord of the Rings. It's all Lord of the Rings, Gimli, blah, blah, blah. He goes, as you get older, though, then he goes, yeah, they want to know, like, what was it like? What did you know was magical to being on set? And he just says how fun it was to be there and filming it. They were having a good time. And you could kind of see that. I think his character, Sala, is just one of the best. I love it.
Sala is amazing. And he's one of, like, he's a quote unquote, like, minor character maybe in this film, but he stands out so much. And he's just this kind of this ball of life and happiness and energy, which nobody else in this film is at this point. So he's in great juxtaposition to everybody else. But hopefully one day, or just send him my love, would you guys? I want to meet him sometime, just because it'll be like, he's entertained in such a way, but it's fun to watch, like, him in this and see that difference between that and Gimli or Treebeard, or even somebody a super minor role like Alfred Molina, who's in the beginning, and he's like Dr. Octavius, and it's like
this is Alfred Molina's very first role, credited film, and in the interview they talk about that. He said that his first day of filming was the tarantulas on his back.
Oh my gosh!
And what was interesting is they put a whole bunch of tarantulas on his back. And they had all these male tarantulas on his back, and they wouldn't move. They were too nervous, I guess, as spiders. Oh. And so they ended up bringing a female spider and put it on him. And then all the male tarantulas just started running around. And he goes, that's your first day of filming in a major film, is like, we're going to cover you in spiders.
It can only go up from there. So
that's true. Yeah.
Experience, everything else is gonna be great.
It's like that's where it started, and he was like, you know what, I'm okay with 8-legged things. I'll be a villain in a Spider-Man film one day. And it's like, that's perfect. Exactly. That's the trajectory, everybody. Just spiders on your first day, major villain in a sequel for Spider-Man one day too. So
Good connection. That's perfect. It worked out well for him. Big foreshadowing.
Exactly. Yeah, we just all go back, and it's so crazy because I didn't realize it was him for the longest time. And you go back and watch, you're like, is that? And he's one of the few names that they mentioned in the very beginning, because there's not a ton of people that have speaking lines in this film. So you see him and you're like, okay. And then like the kind of the interesting screenplay version, which they're kind of more buddy, which is fascinating to me. But in this one, it's very like, we're just kind of for business. And
they did that with Brody's character too. You know, in the first film, it seems almost like a kind of like a mentor to Indy at school. Then in the third film, he's such a fun character. He's just like, he's the best. So I love that. Here's something really interesting though. In Raiders Lost Ark, you know, when Indy fights that big German on the airplane, that's the same actor when he fights him in the Temple of Doom, and there's that big guy and gets crushed by the rocks. Yes. Same guy. Yeah. The very same guy. I think that's amazing. He's actually even in the third one too, Lost Crusade. But I think it's fun that they're reusing people like that.
Yes, and I actually didn't even realize that until not too long ago. We watched Temple of Doom just a little while ago, and we were like, wait, that is the same guy.
He's got a beard on.
Disguised.
Yeah.
It's a good disguise because you wouldn't think of like this gigantic like German mechanic would also be like some sort of slave driver in India. So like you don't, it doesn't make that connection. But when you say it, you're like, oh yeah. In both cases, I wonder if he just has to have gruesome deaths. Like it was in his contract. He's like, all right, when I'm going out as a character, it has to be pretty bad. You have to see like a little blood somewhere else. Just I love that, man, that fight scene. And just Indy's just like, he's like, all right, well, goodbye. The propeller comes and it's just like your mind fills it in, right? You're just like,
it's so good because, you know, Indy is not going to be able to really beat him up. Yeah. You know, he's going to give he's going to give him a run for money, but that guy's going to usually come out on top. And then the propeller, you're just like, that's so ingenious. Like, oh, what a great way to resolve that.
Yeah, I also love that Indy he's a really tough guy, and he actually gets shot during the chase sequence in the truck, and you're like, oh my gosh, like, and there's like kind of blood on the window and the windshield, and you're like, wow, he like took a bullet, and he's committed to this. He's like not gonna lose, and he like kind of takes joy out of like running that one motorcycle, and the passenger like off the road. He's like, he's kind of having fun with it, even though it's like a pretty dire circumstance. And then there's like the lead car with all like the main villains who are just like, we can't deal with this guy, you know. It's just like Indiana Jones kind of thing. Man, I love the fight sequences, and that he isn't like a perfectly good fighter. Like he just has to kind of wing his way through it, and he's just kind of like, he's a dirty fighter too. He'll pick up like sand and throw it in your face. Like he'll do whatever he can to win. Like he's not like, I'm not gonna be honorable.
You know, you talk about that bad day, and then he's on the ship. You know, I don't know if this is more trivia, but that line was like, it's not the years, honey, it's the mileage. That was ad-libbed by Indiana Jones right there. He was just so in character. He felt like that was saying, and Steven Spielberg says, that's one of the greatest lines ever. And it is, because everybody can relate to that. At some point you can relate to that because you're like, oh my gosh, I get it. It's the mileage.
Yeah, it's right before he accidentally gets hit like or after the mirror, and it's like this huge, horrible scream, which I remember as a kid, I used to laugh so loud at that. And then Marion, for some odd reason, she's like, oh, did you say something? Like she didn't hear him. Like,
we're great for laughs.
Oh my gosh, it's so great. And I think we didn't talk about her so much. Marion, out of all the films, which she's in 2 of them, which is great. Yeah. But I think for me, she's just my favorite. There's something really fun about her. She can be a damsel in distress sometimes, but she's intelligent. She will fight back, and she has a pretty good kill count herself. Like she's doing stuff in this film. She is not afraid to get her hands dirty, and I like her because she's such a good kind of pushes Indy in a way. Whereas like some of his other the femme fatales or his other kind of love interests, not in the exact same way. But I really like Marion. What do you guys think about Marion?
Yeah, she's amazing. The thing about her is I feel like she's Indy's equal.
Yeah.
And I think that it's written that way. She's his equal. And she fights for herself. She defends herself. And she's not just sitting there waiting for somebody to come find her. She's literally out there doing her own things. And I love that. Like, she's trying to escape from Belloc all by herself. She's like, well, fine. If Indy's not going to do this, I'm out of here. I'll do it myself. And I like that a lot. I like her mentality, and I think she's just a great. I love her character.
Oh, totally. Yeah, Amanda, do you have any feelings towards Marion?
No, I think she's great. I agree with you. I feel like she's a real character because she's not just like this damsel in distress, or or this like super strong woman. Again, she's a very complex, real character. And I thought that they did a great job with her.
Yeah, you love that drinking scene when they first introduced her character.
Yeah, I think she's fabulous. I think that sets her up really well. Like, exactly what she's capable of, what she's about. But you also see some emotion with her too. So like it starts out, okay, she's strong. She can hold her own to all of these guys. I mean, all of these guys are in her bar, and she just holds her own, and then she kicks them all out. And so it's like, okay, she's strong. But then like you see Indiana Jones come in, and you see like a little bit of weakness and a little bit of emotion in her. So you get this really complex female character. I think she's great.
Yeah, absolutely.
I also love, you talk about all that, and it's funny to think about back to that drinking scene, and then later on during that fight, there like one of the barrels gets hit, and there's like alcohol springing from it, and she grabs it, but she also takes like kind of a little bit of a drink, and then she gets back to fighting. It's just like Marion's like, this is my bar, and she's like, I don't want to like waste this, and it's like, come on, this is the only thing in life that I have. This guy shows up from my past that night, and it's already on fire, and people are shooting. Yeah. It's just like, I need a drink, and it was like mid-fight.
No, she's great, and she's funny too. Yeah, so she's just great all around.
Yeah, I also like the setup too, because they have this like, Belloc's like, all right, I have a dress for you and I have these shoes for you, and I would love to see you wear them. And she's like, okay. And every time she grabs the shoes, I always think of the snake going through the shoe later on, and I'm like, oh, it's a setup for that creepy sequence. And she's like, I feel kind of bad for her, because she's just kind of been ripped out of not a great situation, but put into just a much worse one for a lot of this, it's just like your ex shows up and is like, come on, we're going on an adventure.
Yeah, well, that's a scene that I think that really sets up. That's why I think that people don't think Belloc's a big villain as much, because when they push Marion into the Well of Souls, Belloc's upset.
Yeah,
and because he doesn't want her to go down there and die, and he's like, you see his upset, that adds more to the complex layers of this film, because he's such a bad guy, but then also you realize, but he does care about her.
Oh, totally. And I think subverting, doing like a straight up love triangle is smart, and also making him kind of the shadowy equal or better than Indy that he himself says is really fun, because in that moment when he loses her and him, he kind of even laments it beforehand at the bar. He's like, where would I find another person who comes some close to my level? You know what I mean? And like as they're shutting it, he's just kind of like, I lost this lady I like. I lost my rival. He's like, I'm glad I got the arc, but like at what cost now? Because it's this fun kind of cat and mouse between him and Indy,
Yeah, and people have used that later on. Like we know, like in The Dark Knight with Batman and the Joker, because the Joker's like, kill you. I don't want to kill you. He's like, what would I do without you? And it's the same. That's exactly, Belloc was saying the same thing, but just not quite as eloquently as the Joker.
Yeah, exactly. And when they do get Marion back, I think he takes her again. He's like, no, this time, guys, hey, Nazis, we're not going to just throw her into whatever we want. And he kind of plays it differently. He's like, I will take her as my compensation. If I don't like her, then you guys could do whatever you want. And you could tell he's like lying, because he's like, it didn't work last time to be like, I really like this person. Please don't throw her into a pit of snakes. Yeah. So he's like, this time I'll be much more mean about it, and I'm sure they'll like it. So it's like, that's fun. And I love that's during that sequence when we meet Captain Katanga, who has that ship, those pirates and stuff. He's great too. Like,
he's a great character too. Like, that's what I mean. Everybody in this film is great. Here's a really funny thing for you to see though. Like my friend Ryan, he's actually a director down in LA.
Ryan Little.
And he's the one that pointed this out to me. When he's sitting there right after Miriam had died, and he's getting drunk, right? Mm-hmm. And when Indy's sitting there, it pulls back and does like a wide shot. You can see the street behind him, and there is a crew. There actually is a crew guy in like a polo shirt and Levi's on the far left-hand side of the screen. He's just walking, doesn't realize he's in the frame. On the left-hand side, he's like walking, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. But that.
A little blooper. But it's funny. Yeah, he's just in regular street clothes, and he's just walking around and going, doing his job. And once you see him, you can't see him.
So that's during which sequence again, when they're drinking, did you say?
Yeah.
Well, it's after Indiana Jones thinks that Marion died. And so it's a daytime. He's like in the market.
Yes.
It's before the kids come in and rescue him.
Yeah.
That's so funny. It's moments like that because like you watch these things so many times and you love them so much. And I think sometimes people think, oh, if I see that, it's going to ruin it. I love Jurassic Park, and there's a moment when the raptors are coming through the kitchen, and you actually see somebody's hand steadying the raptor on its back, and it's like stuff like that where I'm like, I love that because it's just like humans made this. They made it, and they didn't change it, and I love it because they're like, look, we actually made it. You know what I mean? Like stuff happens, and it's just endearing. You know?
Or you've got stormtroopers that knock their head on the door frame when you walk in, like stuff like that. It's fun. It's fun.
I just felt even more in love with my wife, and she just said that.
Yeah, well, because like if there was an Amanda Field, we would all be lucky, but she wouldn't be as special. So that's Chris. You were lucky. Just you hold on to her forever. Never let her go. She's amazing. Never. But then again, so are you, Chris. You're both amazing. Just hold on to each other. It's like two. It's that confluence of just good energy. It's too much. I'm kind of glad I can't see you guys right now because it would be like looking into the arc. You know what I'm saying? Look, I did it. I got it. I can stop being a podcaster now. I'm just kidding. Wait, sorry. I had my joke for the day. Anyway, I just don't know. This film is so great. Obviously, if you're listening to this, you're probably like, yes, I love it too. Or maybe you've never watched it before. It's on Netflix right now. That could change. I wouldn't be surprised to see this go to Disney Plus eventually. I don't know where the rights are because that stuff seems to switch. Like anytime you think you want to watch a movie on something, that's when it goes off that streaming service. So if you want to watch something, I recommend doing it right away. And like I said,
it's a great movie. Like, literally just sit down with your family, friends, even by yourself, and just enjoy it. Get yourself a little tasty beverage, just a popcorn, and it'll be over before you realize it's even started because it goes so fast.
Yeah, oh, for sure. Which, by the way, I was going to say, I had a cherry Coke today, so Amanda, apparently I was ready to like have you on the show because I was going to say, because that's one of you like a cherry Coke with like some popcorn or something too, or like a raspberry vanilla mixture. I don't know if that's
vanilla or cherry Coke. And popcorn.
That's my favorite snack. When we go to a restaurant, she'll order. This is what she does every time. I can do it perfectly. She's like, "Do you have Coke?" First she's yes. She goes, "Do you have grenadine?" And they're like, "Yes." And she's like, "Well, can I want a Coke, but put grenadine in the bottom." And it's a Roy Rogers.
Roy Rogers.
And she goes, "But a lot of grenadine."
I feel so good because I feel like a kindred spirit because I do the same thing. I'll say, "Can I have like a cherry Coke?" And they'll say, "Yeah, we have grenadine." I'm like, "That's great." And I'm like, "But don't go easy on it." I call them my blood Cokes, where it's like 80% grenadine, 20% Coke. Yes. It's like red. I'm like, that's the right mixture. When you're having a hard time with the straw, like spinning it and stirring it, that's when you know you're close to what I like, you know? So when I watched your top 5 drinks at Disneyland, I was like, I understand Amanda. She makes sense to me. I was like,
no, you get it. That's me. So I think cherry Coke, some popcorn, and Indiana Jones Raiders of the Lost Ark. You've got a perfect day.
Perfect combo.
Yeah, exactly. Well, guys, I could talk about this, for hours and hours and hours, but we'll just kind of wind down here. But anyway, are there any closing thoughts on Raiders of the Lost Ark that you want to or any other fun trivia? Chris, you have so much. It's amazing. It's like you're a podcast host or something. Shameless plug. I'm sorry. There you go, guys.
It's such a fun movie. I would definitely recommend it. Here's one funny thing you can kind of see is when in the Well of Souls, when Indy is in front of the python, the cobra, they actually have a glass pane in front of that. And you can kind of see that now when you kind of watch it. But they're using a real snake. I mean, that's a real snake right there in front of them. It's just a great movie. I could talk about it all day. I'm so glad that you had us. I'm honored to be on your podcast, Jimmy. You're the best.
Yeah, this was so fun. Seriously, thank you so much. We love you. We're so excited to be here. And you can find us for Provost Park Pass. You can find us on YouTube. And then our podcast is also Provost Park Pass. And it's on iTunes and Google Play and Spotify.
Yes. Yeah. And, I was going to say, for a lot of weeks here, I usually kind of promote myself because that's what you have to do on these types of things. However, this week, I would recommend any of our listeners or any of our viewers here to please, pretty please, go check out Provost Park Pass on YouTube. Because if I'm gonna take this from you guys because you guys have had to say this like a billion times, and I'm gonna do it for you so you don't have to. So please go over there and subscribe to them. If you like Disney, anything related to Disney, Walt Disney World, Disneyland, any kind of Disney-themed things, the Provosts have you covered. They're fantastic. And I've watched a lot of these types of Disney people, and they're all great. They're all wonderful. The Provosts, honestly, and not just because you're here right now, you're my favorite. I'll see a video pop up, and I'm like, yes. I'm like, all right, let's do this. So I'm always so excited to watch your stuff. So please, if you can go over there and subscribe And if you subscribe, the nice thing is that's completely free. A lot of people get confused about this. I know, because we don't have a lot of subscribers around here, but it gets confusing. All right. So what you're going to want to do is you subscribe over there. And then if they hit 100,000 subscribers by New Year's Day, they're going to be giving away a ton of different gifts from Disney. We talked about it before the show. It sounds like you guys have ordered a ton of them already. We're talking Spirit jerseys, not Spirit pants, because we don't know what that is. A bunch of like Mickey ears. As you can tell in Watson videos, just a bunch of stuff from Disney. And they're going to pick 100 people from all their subscribers and send them to people completely free. And again, subscribing to them is free. So there's a chance you could get something for like literally nothing. Just watching this show. Like it's that simple. All you
have to do is subscribe and you're eligible. We've got limited edition pins. We've got Spirit jerseys. We've got backpacks. We've got like home decor. We've got all these gifts coming out, and it's our way of saying thank you for supporting us. We're going to give away 100 gifts to 100 lucky people.
Yes, and I think honestly, for a lot of people who are listening to this, who are watching this, who are familiar with you guys, I feel like we're the lucky ones, because I'm glad that you guys, the people like you exist, like, and are out there making these types of things, because I know it can't be easy all the time. I'm sure there are hurdles and there are days when it's not as simple as just like, oh, I'm just going to throw this together and be excited and happy about it. It's not always going to happen, but you guys have persisted and you're trying to build this beautiful thing here and commit fully to it. And that's so cool. Like, we should start like that, you know? That's, I don't know. I'm obviously a big Disney guy, but I don't know. I'm a pretty big fan of the Provost too. You guys are right up there with the Disney stuff.
Thank you so much.
You guys could talk about almost anything and I'd be excited about it. I'd be like, the Provost here. Because you guys I'm a vibe vampire. I feast off the good energy. So I'm just like, you guys are like, you're my people. But please, if you're listening to this, consider doing that. If you're already a subscriber over to them, just share like their channel around with people. That's completely free to do too, on Facebook and Twitter and all the places, Instagram, and all that sort of thing. And if you want to support them even further, they do have a Patreon, so you can go support them. And it's very, very reasonable. They give you an extra video every week if you're at $3. And I don't know, it's just great. Like I said, I know you guys have had to do this a lot lately, so I was like, I'll kind of try to help.
Appreciate it so much.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you guys being on the show, because you guys are wonderful. And I was just like, I'm going to ask them, because we kind of talked Raiders last time. I was like, let's do like an official kind of Raiders thing, and kind of get into it a little bit more. But again, I appreciate you guys so much for being on the show. It's so cool to hear your voices in real time. I feel so privileged and lucky. So thank you guys for being on the show. Is there anything else you guys want to say before you head off?
No, it's just always a pleasure. Thank you for inviting us to be on your show.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. And we'll be on hopefully again soon.
Yeah,
I hope so too. Oh my gosh. Like I said, well, they're going to, like you guys said, we'll be on every week now. So they're going to be part of the show. We're just going to have 2 new people always on the show, which, no, that'd be a little intense, wouldn't it? But please check out their podcast. It's fantastic. It's not long enough. It should be at least 3 hours every week. So, I don't think that's too much to ask for me right now from your fans. I'm just going to speak for all of your fans right now, all the thousands of them, tens of thousands, soon to be hundreds of thousands, which is great. Well, I appreciate you guys. Thank you for being on. And until next time, just remember to adapt to no good.
All right, talk to you later.